this tour was supposed to be viburnums and azaleas. What? It's going to be some viburnums and azaleas.
You're freaking farmhouse.
They're just not quite there. It's so cold. They're late. So I'm going to throw some other things in there. Otherwise, we could look at a bunch of bare plants. There is no plant list. There was a plant sale this weekend, and I was going to work on the plant list last night, but I was instead at a doctor being told I have a fractured arm and ribs. So there, yeah, look at that barb over here. Yeah, I should get a little sympathy. Normally this time of year, the viburnums, the azaleas are really at their peak. It's always tough to tell what we're going to get year to year. They're two of the premier spring plants, and what's interesting about them, both viburnums and azaleas, is everybody from the northeast, Canada, they're growing azaleas, rhododendrons, viburnums up there. Go down into Florida, Louisiana, viburnums and azaleas there. Unlike a lot of plants where we may grow them in the south, they don't grow them in the north, or vice versa. So they're really popular garden plants and fill kind of any niche in the garden, just about from trees to small low shrubs. So we'll go through. We're going to look at viburnums and azaleas, but we're also going to branch off and look at a few other things that are really looking good right now. So like always, we've got some new faces I think here. This is pretty informal. We'll go to a plant, I'll talk about it, but if on the way you have a question about something you see or something I say, brings to mind a question, ask it. If I say something and you've had a different experience with the plant I'm talking about, please chip in. Everybody has luck with some things that others of us struggle with, and vice versa. So we always are looking for input. All right, let's get going. All right, our first one is an azalea, rhododendron. Rhododendron and azalea, at one point they were separated out into different genera based on number of stamens, some minor characteristics, but now the general consensus is they're all rhododendrons. So when I'm saying, we'll be talking about kind of both rhododendron and azalea as we're looking at some of these plants. This is rhododendron Chapmanii Wonder. This is a fairly recent hybrid between rhododendron minus variety Chapmanii, or rhododendron Chapmanii, and which is a lovely little shrub, and then rhododendron doricum. The rhododendron minus is a evergreen to semi-evergreen plant. Rhododendron doricum is completely deciduous. They're both very early flowering. Rhododendron doricum is often the first in flower in the garden. So this one is a pretty early form. Normally it would be done this time of year. It's generally pretty good and done. And this is actually the funny thing is the doricum parent is actually the white form for this Chapmanii Wonder. But you get the same color as doricum and the typical doricum in minus. So it makes an evergreen shrub to semi-evergreen shrub. You'll sometimes lose quite a few of the leaves. It'll tend to be a little thin during the winter. Sometimes you get some nice purplish color to the foliage. It kind of seems to depend on soil and the spot that it's in. Ours doesn't get too much of that plummy purple foliage color. Really nice trusses of flowers. Typically, you can get from anywhere from about 5 to 8 or 10 flowers in a cluster. No fragrance. Rhododendron doricum tends to have more of an open flower, but the minus Chapmanii has a more of a funnel shape, so you get a little bit more of that funnel shaped flower. This is one of the real sun-tolerant ones. It really does well in full sun. It'll take part shade just fine, but you get the best flower show in full sun. Now, we've let ours kind of go a little bit if you were to do some pruning right after it finishes flowering, within a month or so of it finishing flowering, you could get a much tighter, denser plant if you wanted that, if you didn't want it open like this. You know, this was kind of when we got it, it had one stalk that was up and everything else was pretty small, so we left it. But wouldn't hurt to, after it flowers, to cut this out and you know, trim back a little bit and keep a little bit nicer shape to it. It can be used kind of wherever you want as a specimen plant. You can mass them as a you know, a tall foundation plant. Put them in the woodland garden, whatever you like. Questions?
Where are they from?
Asia. There's an Asian hybrid.
Do azaleas have much of a wildlife benefit?
I'm sorry?
Do azaleas have much of a wildlife benefit?
Do azaleas have much of a wildlife benefit? It depends on the azalea. Definitely the native azaleas, the rhododendron canescens and philanium and those, especially the deciduous native rhododendrons, are great for butterflies and a few of the hummingbirds. Rhododendron prunifolium, which is about the latest, one of the latest flowering azaleas, period, but certainly the latest native one, which will flower in August, in July often. That one hummingbirds really like, is really dark orangey red. So they're good in that sense.
I'm feeding the local deer with mine.
Good for deer, yeah. All right, we're going a little off topic here, but the bulbs can be so quick that I often don't get a chance to talk about them. So I'm going to talk about a couple of my favorites right here. This is a Tulipa clusiana variety chrysantha, sometimes called the lady tulip. Tulips are not necessarily great plants for us here in the southeast. They really need that cold period over the winter to come back year after year. You know, you can get pre-chilled tulips, plant them, and basically treat them like annuals, and that's great. There are a few that will perennialize. They'll come back year after year. They'll flower more or less, but they don't really bulk up, and you don't get big masses of display, you know, bigger and better displays year after year. But then there are some that actually will do that will come back year after year. The clumps will get bigger. They'll spread around a little bit, but if you let them go to seed, they'll seed around in the garden politely, not a problem. And the clusiana tulips are one of those. You see over here at this corner, Tulipa peppermint stick, which is another clusiana type tulip. That one's got a little bit of something else in it, but basically the typical Tulipa clusiana is in between here. You get pale yellow with the reddish on the outside of the petals. The chrysantha, you get the dark gold in the center with the reddish on the outside. Peppermint stick white with a little bit of that red. Real easy plants. These are fairly newly planted ones, so they haven't bulked up yet, but they will. What's nice, they get, even after they fade, the foliage is kind of nice. So the other tulips, you get that big foliage. It kind of looks messy once the flowers are gone. This is kind of silvery blue. It's narrow. The flowers fade. The foliage you don't notice it so much, and then it'll go dormant pretty early. You don't want to cut back the foliage on your bulbs until they start yellowing back about a third or so. Go ahead and cut them off. You know, I know some people like to braid them and things like that. Boy, knock yourself out if you want to do that. That's a pretty silly endeavor. Roll them up. Well, you don't want to roll them up too much because they need the green out there. You know, they got to photosynthesize. Might as well cut it if you're gonna roll it up. So, pardon? Well, squirrels, in my experience, squirrels couldn't care really just don't care about tulip bulbs at all. They don't want to eat them. They just want to see what the acorns that you're digging holes and burying. And usually, if you get your tulips in, if the squirrels come right after you, they'll dig it up the next day or the next day. After that, you're fine. If you have an issue with that, you can put a little handful of gravel on top of them. They don't like to dig through gravel, so you don't need anything special. You don't need vole block, anything like that. Just some 1/4-inch sharp gravel on top if that is an issue. But I have planted tulips and then come back and found tulip bulbs like up in the crotches of trees and things like that. So yeah, that's more irritating than anything else. They think you're hiding something good from them. This is a rhododendron that we had kind of misnamed for a while. Weren't quite sure what it was, but then some of our Japanese friends came over and said, "Oh, that's Yoshino." This is, interestingly, it's hard to find this in the U.S. Unfortunately, it's a great plant, mostly deciduous, a little bit. You call it semi-evergreen. You can see even after this cold winter, it's got a couple of little leaves on there. Those will push off. Now we've just let this grow. It's getting pretty shaded, so it's not flowering and looking as nice as it was. It really wants full sun to light shade for this one. What's interesting about this Yoshino, and we have propagated it and given it to nurserymen because we really like it, is in Japan, in Tokyo and areas like that, it's used as a out street sides as a hedge, tightly clipped, low hedge. Flowers in the spring, and then they start trimming it back and keeping it cut really tight. They'll stop about maybe beginning of July. They won't cut it anymore and let it go. But they really like this as a hedge plant. It seems to respond very well. It's very dense, very twiggy, which a lot of rhododendrons don't want to do that. So I think that's a really kind of an interesting use for a rhododendron, one that we don't typically think of with rhododendron and azalea. Very early flowering, very, very showy. The flowers are really faded now. When they first come out, it's really a vibrant color. And then actually, it's one of the more handsome ones just in foliage through the rest of the year. Can't tell now, but it'll have a relatively long leaf for some of these deciduous azaleas, but thick textured, much thicker textured than our native deciduous azaleas. Kind of a cup shape to the leaf. They're small this time of year, but when they come out, they'll be quite a bit larger. And on the backs, they often have a little bit of a rusty colored fuzz on the back. Really nice.
I'm curious, how do they trim the hedge? Do they like square it or round it, or?
A little of both. Depends on how they like it. The question was how do they hedge it? Like squares, rounded. Typically, it's pretty well squared, but sometimes you get ones with a rounded top. But they'll go through. They'll plant them small, and plant them just staggered, usually 8 inches apart. Little plants. I mean, just boom, 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 boom. And so when you look down, kind of at the base, you'll see. I mean, they're growing almost on top of each other. But we tend not to be patient enough to start with little plants. Little plants are cheap; you can put them close together. So if you're going with a larger one, you'd want to space it a little bit more. But it makes for a really dense hedge. And if one of them dies, since they're so close, it fills in. You don't get that big gap in your hedge.
How many kinds of rhododendron are there, and how difficult are they to tell apart? You said they came and said weren't sure what it was.
How many different types are there? Well, when you're talking about cultivars, things like hundreds and hundreds, thousands, I wouldn't begin to be able to tell you. But well, we had a name on it.
Oh, okay.
It was an incorrect name, but it was kind of close. And this is a very distinct looking plant. When you come out during the summer, even when it's not in flower, it is a very distinct plant. So, and since it's one, it'd be like us going over and seeing Photinia, something that we use as a hedge plant pretty commonly. That's how come the Japanese who are visiting now.
But most of them are difficult to tell apart unless you know what the hybrid is.
Yeah. A lot of them are. Some are easier than others based on how popular they are, so you can make a pretty educated guess. It's hard to come to a place like this and know for sure because we're growing all kinds of different things. But other questions or thoughts? All right. Yeah.
Next question about bamboo.
You can.
Will this put on new leaves here, or who knows?
Well, in general, no. Question was, will bamboo put on new leaves at the top? In general, the answer is no to that. The stalk comes up, it's got all its leaves on there. When those leaves die, you can cut that stalk off because it's never going to do anything again. And that'll be the case for most of these branches, perhaps all of them. I hesitate to say for sure with this one. This is a dwarf one, a dwarf Bambusa multiplex called Fernleaf. And this is one of the few bamboos that you can root from cuttings. It just seems to behave a little different than other bamboos. So I would imagine it will not come out later, but some of these green stems, it is possible that we'll get more leaves on those. But I don't know that for sure. In general, no.
So you'll just cut it back?
We'll just cut it back, yeah. And be happy to do it.
So interesting.
Yeah. The thing is, you want to go ahead, you want to cut it back sooner rather than later, because if you wait until the new spears, the new shoots are coming up, and you cut them, that's it. You know, they won't reflush or anything like that. So we need to get to it pretty soon. All right, this one's one we like to kind of brag about. This is a flowering quince. It's not a azalea or viburnum. Canomeles, the flowering quince. These are kind of old-fashioned plants. People have been growing these in their landscapes in the U.S. for hundreds of years, in Japan and Asia and China for thousands of years. A lot of really old cultivars. They can be, a lot of times people don't want to grow them anymore because they flower once in the spring, although that's the same as most azaleas. But they also typically have lots of thorns. They're often they flower on older wood, so often you'll get a big plant and all the flowers will be on the inside. You don't have anything on the outside, and they can be prone to a lot of diseases. Well, this is a relatively new series, just released in the last 4 or 5 years maybe, from one of NC State's breeders, Tom Ranney, who is a prolific plant breeder, really a genius plant breeder. This series, the Storm series, this is Scarlet Storm, there's Orange Storm, there's Pink Storm, and they're all bred to be thornless, which is great if you ever have dealt with flowering quince. They are vicious plants. They are relatively disease resistant. It's in the rose family, and everything in the rose family is prone to some diseases, but these tend to stay very clean all season long, and then bred for very large flowers. So I mean, these flowers are easily half again, twice as big as some of the older forms of flowering quince. So really like this thing. He's also bred it so that you get blooms farther out. Still not all the way out to the ends of the branches, but getting there. What I like to do with quince is to keep it a little more restrained. I'll tend to cut back above the top blooms, not right above them, because you need some of that growth for the next year, but cut back a little bit, and that kind of keeps it a little bit denser, a little tighter, keeps it from kind of sprawling. You can really do that anytime. Well, you don't want to do it too late in the season because it'll be forming as flower buds, but you can do it while it's flowering. You can do it shortly after it finishes flowering, whichever is fine.
Can you prune it back hard?
You can prune it back hard. You may not get flowers the next year.
So this wouldn't be a plant, if you had a small area, this would not be a plant that you would say to yourself, oh, I'll just be able to keep it small.
Well, you can keep them. There are some smaller forms, but you could keep it, 3 feet or 4 feet or so. Now, I would say my personal preference would be if you have a very small garden, this is a one-season plant. It is spectacular right now. 3 weeks from now, it's going to be a green plant. I might go with something that's going to give you some flowers and fruit, or has some more foliar appeal to it. But that's just me. I'll show you another rhododendron, azalea rhododendron, again closely related. Just to point out that there are some that you can get some foliar interest in. This is gold flimmer. You can see with a little bit of a gold variegation down the center of the leaf. This is one of the more popular, more widely available variegated rhododendron. The other one that you see pretty often is President Roosevelt, which has a variegated leaf as well. This one has big trusses of pink flowers. You can see the flower buds on top. It's still a good month away from flowering, probably, depending on the weather. If we get a lot of heat, may come sooner. President Roosevelt has kind of almost a Piketty flower. Each individual flower has kind of pink around the rim and then almost white down towards the center. So a little bit of an unusual display, both foliage and flowers. I like them. You know, this was a rough winter, so the foliage is looking a little bit rough, but to me it gives you a little bit of added interest as you go through the season. But most of what's going to be flowering now are like this, the deciduous ones. And there's this is the azaleas and rhododendron are groups that are known often by their hybridizers or where they were hybridized. The Aromi hybrids are kind of a historic group of hybrid deciduous rhododendron, mostly native. There is some non-native blood in them, but mostly using native stock. It's bred, I believe, in Alabama, if I remember correctly. We have a pretty good collection through here. If you walk through here, you'll see quite a few of the Aromi hybrids. They were really bred for flower colors, different flower colors, and you get everything from pure white to something like this, where it's almost white on the inside with a dark pink tube on the outside, to deep gold, pale yellow, almost red, orange, and they kind of open over a succession. The other thing they were often bred for, and I'm not getting it, is they were really trying to get the fragrance into these plants. Some better than others. Helps if you have a warm, sunny day. But all of them are pretty similar in appearance in terms of they'll make kind of an upright shrub, deciduous, and then you'll get these long tubular flowers with the male and female parts hanging out like this. That's why sometimes they're called bush honeysuckles, because they look kind of like a honeysuckle, although some other plants are also known as bush honeysuckles. Questions, thoughts?
That looks a lot like a pinkster that we used to call.
Yeah. That's certainly one of the parents of this. Yeah, it looks very much like our native pinkster bloom, the Rhododendron canescens. You know, this, you can definitely, when you look at all the Aromi hybrids, if you're familiar with the different native deciduous azaleas, you can definitely, you know, start figuring out what some of the parentage is on them. Next week, end of next week, beginning of the week after, you got to come in and see this plant. It's a new osmanthus, and those of you who know me know how much I love osmanthus. This is one called Shien is the Japanese name, but it's the cultivar name, but it's being sold as Party Lights, and it's a very upright, stiff osmanthus heterophilus, so it looks like it has kind of the holly leaf type leaves. But when it comes out, the new growth, and you can just start to see it, it is screaming pink. I mean, it is bright. It is a very, very cool plant. You know, I get excited by just about any plant that's new, but there are some plants that you see, you're like, that is good. So osmanthus heterophilus, you know, typically it has the small white flowers, very fragrant, very nice, but they're kind of, the flowering is pretty subdued. You're growing it more as a nice evergreen plant. But this one, with that new growth that comes out, that bright pink, all of a sudden it becomes almost like a spring flowering evergreen shrub, which is really nice. The other nice thing about the osmanthus heterophilus is these are much hardier than the osmanthus fragrans that most people are growing. A lot of the osmanthus heterophilus will grow into the warmer areas of zone 6 without a problem at all. So they can go up in the mountains a little bit easier than some of the other osmanthus.
How large does it get?
This particular one,
yeah,
I don't know. It hasn't been in the trade very long. Based on the vigor I'm seeing here, I think it's ultimately going to be a pretty large shrub. You know, osmanthus heterophilus over time can be 12, 15 feet tall or more. You know, I think in a kind of your normal landscape time frame, which is 10 years is what you usually say is mature height, I think you're going to get about 8 or 10 feet maybe. And it's always tricky. I always hate giving heights on plants because last time I was in China, I visited somebody who was growing osmanthus, the osmanthus king. That's what we were supposed to call him, osmanthus king. He had some 250-year-old, he said, osmanthus that they brought out of the mountains, and they had lopped these things off. They had branches like this that had been lopped off so they could bring it down, and with stuff like this cut off the top of it, it was just the trunk was 25 feet tall. So, you know, if you were to ask me how big osmanthus fragrans get, I would say, well, a really old one will top out at, you know, 20 feet maybe. You know, this thing was probably, you know, close to 40 feet. So, you have 250 years, you know, this may. All right, another azalea. And I'm picking this one because, you know, we kind of give a hard time to the government. We say they can't do anything up there. Here is proof that the U.S. government can do something good. This is a Beltsville hybrid azalea. This came out of the USDA station in Beltsville, Maryland, right outside of D.C. There was kind of a mixed bag that came out of there. Mostly, a lot of them were the Satsuki type azaleas like this. Others were the Southern Indica. Satsuki azaleas tend to be the smaller, lower growing plants, very small leaves, more or less evergreen. They're really nice for kind of ground covering and massing. You can use them that way very well. For a small garden spot, they make a great little accent. They also, if you are into bonsai and that kind of thing, they can make really interesting shapes with them. They have more of a tendency to kind of cascade a little bit. Purple cushion is one that's, I don't know if purple is really the right name for it, but makes just a little low mound of flowers. It will just cover itself in flower. The terminal of every branch usually has a flower on it, so it's a really nice little showy plant. The other group that they worked with, the Southern Indicas, those are the bigger ones. You see them, they're flowering now, starting to flower now. They'll have kind of a, you know, the big tubular flowers. You see the kind of the pinkish lavender one real commonly, that George Lindley Tabor, or Pixie, the dwarf one of that. So those are some real, kind of the two southern ones, the Satsukis and the Southern Indicas that you see so often in the trade. But this little guy I really like, this purple pick cushion.
How big will it get eventually?
How big will it get? It'll probably maybe 24 inches tall, and then get 36, 40 inches wide. You know, I would say, you know, really you're looking at about 18 inches tall by 30 inches wide is pretty good. How many people here moved to North Carolina from the north?
Yay!
Yeah, okay.
Lilac.
Here is the answer to your question. There is a lilac that you can grow here that is very similar to the common lilac, Syringa vulgaris. There is a series of lilacs, again, from our government, the USDA breeding program. You can pick them out because they have names that you would associate with the government, like Betsy Ross, Constitution. Constitution's a dark purple one. There's another one that's more typical lilac colored. I can't remember what it's called, but it has some kind of you know, patriotic name. So, like common lilac, it makes kind of a big, gangly shrub. The same typical leaf you would see on the common lilacs you grew up north. Betsy Ross is a white one, but you can see great big individual flowers, bigger than your typical common lilac, and it has a fragrance. There are other lilacs that grow down here. They don't have lilac fragrance, so there is a lilac that you can grow, and you can smell it. This is I'm not sure the entire parentage of it, but it's got the common lilac, but then it's also got Syringa oblata, which I would show you. It's in flower now, but it's mucky back where it is. We've got some drainage issues. So if you're one of those people who's missing your lilac, from up north, look for Constitution or Betsy Ross or one of those. And, you know, you can treat it like you would a lilac back up north. You can let it grow great, big, huge. You can cut it back a little more regularly and get it to keep a little more restrained size. Any questions? And it is more or less mildew resistant.
Do you have any idea what would be a common lilac that if you bought a brand new house and somebody was dumb enough to put it in the front walkway, and it's about this high? And I was like, I think that's a lilac, and somebody, you know, I
Is
took
it
it
small
to
leaves?
Yeah, it's smaller than that. So I moved it, but do you have any idea what they would have put?
Is a good chance that if it was planted in the last year or two,
Yeah.
it's very good chance that it's bloomerang, Syringa penda, bloomerang. Which do you know if it flowered in the fall? Were you there in the fall?
No, it did not fall in the fall, and I think I'm seeing flowers
Right.
this spring.
Well, bloomerang is a reblooming one, and when you leave the corner of the lath house right there, there's one that's just coming into flower right now. So you can look at that if you want.
What color are the flowers?
Purple flowers.
Purple flowers.
Typically smaller than common lilac. It's got a smaller leaf, but the same shape. It does not have the fragrance.
Oh.
And I will say, people have asked me about it. We had some at our plant sale this weekend, and people asked me about bloomerang. And I badmouthed it for about 3 years because I said, well, yeah, it reflowers, but even the original flowers aren't very good. And then last year, it kind of won me over. It was just covered in flowers, and you can look at it now. It is getting ready to just be covered, and then it spits out some flowers over the summer, and then has another smaller rebloom in the fall. So I mean, come on, lilacs are one season shrubs, so you get another season out. It's pretty nice. No fragrance.
Are all of them in this series fragrant? The Constitution you mentioned?
Yeah,
Whatever
yeah.
they're called?
I know this one's fragrant because I can smell it. I have not put my nose in the other ones, but they are supposed to be.
How much shade would this one tolerate?
Oh, lilacs will take a lot of shade. They just won't flower.
Deadheading worthwhile?
No, not really. You know, not unless you're the kind of person like deadheading on this will not. You won't get more flowers, and that's typically the reason to deadhead. Yeah, I mean, you know, with a butterfly bush, they keep flowering and flowering and flowering. So if you deadhead them, you'll get more flowers. With a lilac, those flower buds are already set. Deadheading it is not going to get more of them out in the same season. You know, if you don't get seed production, then more energy goes into the plant growing and being healthy and producing flower buds for next year. But you know,
So this is typically as much as this one flowers. This is the.
Well, no, it's doing some funky things. You can see there's flowers that are just coming out over here. I'm not sure why. We got to get in there. This is not a fantastically grown plant. Probably ought to cut it back hard, let it re-sprout, and grow it with a better shape. But you can see it's kind of twisted around and choking itself down here.
How old is that one? Do you know? It's just been
We received the plant in 2004.
Oh, no.
I don't know what size it was, but it probably I know it languished in the nursery for a little longer than it should, which is why you're seeing some issues down with the base of
Do you
it.
have any idea how large that bloomerang will turn?
It's a pretty small. The bloomerang's a pretty small plant, maybe top out at 5 or 6 feet. We're on a roll with these government bred plants. This is a Don Egoff hybrid. This is Viburnum excarcephalum cayuga. And if you get these viburnums with Native American names, those are usually Don Egoff's hybrids. This is a hybrid with Carlesii and Macrocephalum. Right? Yeah, that's right. It's a deciduous viburnum. You have both evergreen and deciduous viburnums. This is a deciduous one. It starts flowering and leafing out about the same time. Some of the deciduous viburnums, really you get all the flowers before the leaves come out. Others you get a little more overlap. This is one of the ones with overlap. A lot of these, like this one, are very nice in that they start off with real nice pink buds, and you can see that a little bit in here and on here, and then open up to pure white. I really like Cayuga because it has some of the largest individual flowers in these flower heads. You can pass it around. It is fragrant. A lot of these deciduous viburnums are exceptionally fragrant, especially the Burkwoodii types, which will have a similar appearance. I was going to show one, but it apparently was cut back rejuvenation pruning, so I couldn't show it to you. But in 2 years, underneath those crepe myrtles, there's a beautiful mohawk that'll be flowering in 2 years from now, right where that big hole is. They're pretty easy shrubs. The more sun they get, the better they flower, the better they'll go. A lot of them, and I can't remember if Cayuga is one or not, a lot of them will get a pretty nice fall color, kind of burgundy fall color. It's not going to compete with your red maples, but still awfully nice. They'll also, many of them will get red fruits after it finishes flowering. Cayuga does not fruit very well in my experience, but some will do better than others. But where they do fruit well, you get some really spectacular show. Yep.
I got a bunch of Chindo. They've been in a couple of years now. Several of them, I guess it's because of the cold. I guess that's what I'm asking. These are turn red.
Yeah.
Is that the whole influence on them?
Yeah. Viburnum awabuki chindo, which we're fond of because it's one that JC collected in Korea and introduced, it's an evergreen viburnum. We'll look at it there. So remind me if I don't answer your question, remind me to answer it, because we'll end right there. Okay. Viburnums. As along through here, this is kind of the bulk of our viburnum collection. We've got viburnums spread all through the arboretum, and we have other things in here as well, but a lot of viburnums. Now, 2007, and some of you have heard me talk about this, 2007, during the drought, we really got hammered. The viburnums in here, we lost quite a few viburnums, gave us the opportunity to plant new things in here because we lost so many. Or they just were damaged really very badly. The one species that really stood out was Viburnum obovatum. Just did not have a problem at all. Viburnum obovatum is one of our native viburnums. It's native to kind of the deep south, southern part of South Carolina, Georgia, Florida, North Florida kind of area. And it can be a rangy shrub. This is kind of typical Viburnum obovatum or Walter's viburnum habit. Actually, this is pretty nice for a wild one. They tend to be kind of leggy, crazy things. But this is the same species. This is one that we were growing as Ms. Schiller's Delight, but we found there are two plants floating around that were being called Ms. Schiller's Delight that were not the same thing. The one that is mostly in the nursery trade is more upright, and we found out this winter not as hardy as the Ms. Schiller's Delight. Not that the winters killed it, but they did a lot of damage to the foliage. So we've renamed this Ralston Hardy because it is different from the Ms. Schiller's Delight that's in the trade. And this makes a nice low mound. Really flowers its heaviest right now, actually usually a little earlier, late March. It'll really get going, and it can just be covered in flower, just be one solid snowball. And then it'll kind of nice green mound over the summer, and then in the fall and through the winter it'll kind of sporadically flower. During a really cold winter, the foliage will turn kind of purpley, plummy colors, which is kind of nice. But you know, I always look at this and think, why on earth would anybody plant a dwarf Japanese holly? That's going to be just a little green mound when you can have a little green mound that has white flowers on it. It just makes a lot more sense to me. And super drought tolerant, like I was saying. So, great plant. Yep.
I don't know which one I have, whether it's Mrs. Schiller's or somebody else, but it suckers pretty crazily.
Yes, glad you mentioned that because I should have. Viburnum obovatum can sucker. Not all the forms sucker. Our experience with Ms. Schiller's Delight is that it's a little bit better, meaning it suckers less than some other ones. Compactum and Riefler's Dwarf, two other, Riefler's Dwarf a little bit bigger, Compactum a little bigger than that, we find sucker really bad. But if you do a lot of gardening around there and cutting roots and things like that, you're going to get a pretty good number of suckers. So that is something to be aware of.
What about Davidii? Do well here?
Davidii, yeah.
It does?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Oh,
Davidii? Viburnum Davidii?
Yeah.
Question was, does Viburnum Davidii do well here? No. It is a miserable plant for here.
Okay.
Hates it here. But there's a new hybrid, and I cannot remember what the name of it is, but it's a Davidii tinus hybrid that looks a lot like Viburnum Davidii. In appearance, it's more like that, but it grows well for us. So that's one you want to look for. And if you get in touch with me, I can tell you the hybrid name, but
okay.
I can't remember it right off the top of my head. But yeah. All right, a few more viburnums. This is another one of those Egolf hybrid viburnums. Can't remember both parents of Connoy, but one of them is Viburnum Udali, which has a small, glossy, evergreen leaf. And Connoy really carried over that trait of the Viburnum Udali with the smaller leaf, darker, glossier green. A lot of Egolf's hybrids are, like that Cayuga we looked at first, that's fully deciduous, has the the pink buds going to white flowers. Connoy may be one of the most utilitarian, and I don't say that in a bad way, but of the Egolf hybrids. And because it is evergreen, it's got a pretty restrained size. This is a pretty good old one. Tolerates pruning pretty well, and really flowers very heavily every year. It is fragrant. As you go by, you can smell it. It doesn't smell as good as the Burkwoodii types, Mohawk and some of those, but still very nice in terms of the flower show, foliage, ease of growth. I've found Connoy and the Udali hybrids a little more shade tolerant, and that may be because they can still photosynthesize over the winter when you have deciduous trees. You won't get this kind of flower show in heavy shade, but it will grow well there. Questions? Back here, this is Exocorta. This is the pearl bush. This is one of those really old-fashioned. It kind of, you can plant your flowering quince under this. Really old-fashioned plant. It's beautiful when you see one in full flower, and this is nothing. When you see Exocorta in full flower, it is breathtaking. I mean, it is one of the most gorgeous things around. The rest of the year, you'd be hard-pressed to even notice it was there. So, one really, really good season. Maybe worth growing it for that one really good season. I don't know. It is not in flower, but quite yet. It's got flower buds going. But just because the other viburnums I've talked about all had entire leaves without any kind of real lobing or anything like this. This is the Viburnum opulus, the kind of cranberry bush, sometimes it's called, which has kind of three-lobed leaves, almost more maple leaf flower. Maple leaf, not flower, maple leaf looking. This form is Calvescens. This has the lace cap type flower, so it'll have a ring of sterile florets around the fertile florets, kind of like a lace cap hydrangea. There are mophead forms. Roseum is one that we were selling at our sale, which is kind of misnamed because it is not rose-colored flowers. They kind of fade to pink. but they're the you know, snowball type flowers on there. So the Viburnum opulus make a large plant. You get the white flowers and then these really beautiful red fruits. That's why it's called the cranberry bush, because you get these cranberry red fruits and cranberry sized fruits hanging all over it, which is really spectacular.
That upright form is commonplace.
Yeah, I mean, we've done some pruning where it was going out, but yeah, Viburnum opulus tends to be a little more upright. And with any plant like this, you can do a lot of rejuvenation pruning. We haven't done much of anything like that, but you can come in there, and there are various ways to prune these shrubby viburnums like this. You can come in there and whack them off right down the ground. I mean, don't go a foot up. Do it 6 inches. You know, get them down low, and they'll resprout. You'll lose flowers for a year or two. You can also you can come back and, you know, cut back low and let them resprout, but you'll still have kind of bare branches. What I like to do with these larger viburnums is don't let them get to this point, but every so many years, say every 2-3 years, come in there and take out maybe a quarter of the oldest, thickest stems. Do it right after it finishes flowering so you don't miss out on flowering. Cut them out, just remove them. That kind of keeps the height down because you're getting rid of the oldest stuff. It also encourages more growth down near the base, so you get a fuller looking plant all the way through. So since everybody was so interested in the other lilac, I decided to stop by this one. This is Syringa petula, Beretta pubescens. This is another fragrant lilac. It's a little better for us than the common lilac in that it flowers for us. It is fairly disease prone though, so I would go with one of the hybrids over this. But if you just have to have the lilac flowers, this is going to get you a little bit better than the Syringa vulgaris. Not the same great color, but definitely that same fragrance. That's if you grew up with that, you know you love it. There's a question earlier about Viburnum awabuki chindo, and I mentioned that that's one of the plants that JC collected and introduced from Korea, along with Emerald Pagoda styrax right here. So this is an old Viburnum awabuki chindo. It has been misnamed and renamed, and sometimes gets lumped in with Viburnum odoratissimum, which if you grew up in the deep south you may be familiar with. It's grown in the deep south. It is not Viburnum odoratissimum, despite what the flora of China likes to say. Much different plant. So Viburnum awabuki chindo is an evergreen plant. Very glossy, dark green, large leaves. These are relatively small leaves. Leaves can be you know, up to 10 inches long, especially on a young, vigorous plant. In the winters, on occasion, you'll get either the whole plant turning burgundy or even red. More often, you get like a single branch or two that go just brilliant red. Sometimes go deciduous after that, but then usually it'll leaf out again. I have no idea why that happens, so can't answer your question for why. But it is something that happens sporadically on the plant. It'll get big clusters of white flowers. They're kind of the fragrance is not wonderful to me. Other people may like it. And then followed ideally by large clusters of red fruit. Now it's interesting, this was actually selected and named chindo because it was collected from some heavy flowering Viburnum awabuki. So it was kind of sold as a heavy fruiting form of Viburnum awabuki. Now the one it was collected from was probably heavy fruiting because there were a bunch of seedlings there. And what will happen is if you get all true chindo, if you plant up, say, a hedge of true chindo, you get very little fruiting usually. Every few years you'll get heavy fruiting, but not great fruiting. Whereas if you take seed from those plants and sow that and grow seedlings with a little more genetic variability, and you plant them together, you typically get much better fruiting. So it's kind of an issue with the plant if you're getting it for the fruit. But it makes, you can see this, you can grow it up as a tree. Typically it's grown as a tall, upright evergreen shrub. grows pretty quickly, makes a great screening plant. Much better than, say, Leyland cypresses or something like that, because it's a little more restrained, a little bit, and very dense and beautiful. Chris, do you know if this is the original?
I think it is, yeah.
Yeah, I think this is the original from the 85, 86 collection. So
long lasting.
So oh yeah, so it's very long lived plant, and you know it's kind of abused there, and still does very well.
I have a plant in my yard that looks a lot like that. I've never known what it was, and it's like 3 stories tall. I mean, it might be 4.
I mean, I've seen them bigger than this, but if you bring in a piece of it, you know, bring in something like that.
Yeah.
If it has flowers on it, you bring it with flowers. It's real easy to identify.
I've
but
never
even
seen a flower, but it's.
well, you'll be one way to tell a viburnum. One of the clues, anyway, is they'll be the leaves will be opposite. Typically on viburnums, many of the viburnums don't have scales on the leaf buds, but on Viburnum awabuki it does, and they're kind of these keeled scales covering it. They're just opening up now. But yeah, if you take a picture of a branch of it and send it to me, I can help you identify it. So that's kind of it for we didn't have a ton of azaleas in flower, and you know, kind of bare azaleas, not the most wonderful things. I do want to point out a couple of things before you go that aren't on the tour, but you might want to look at. Right behind you in this garden, this dogwood that's flowering, that's the Mexican dogwood. Go up and look at the flowers on it. The petals don't separate, so you get these very funky looking flowers on there compared to the normal dogwood you're used to. Also would point out that there are lots of red buds flowering now. You can check them out on your own. There's also a self-guided tour map that you can pick up inside. That'd be good to see. And really, it's just everything's looking spectacular. You can just go through and look at the Japanese maples, the spring growth coming out, and be pretty amazing. So, happy to answer any questions, but otherwise, thank you all for coming.
Thank you, Mark.
I really enjoyed it.